Many of the women I work with are incredibly capable. They're leading teams, they're raising kids, they're staying active, they're eating well, and yet suddenly their body feels like it's working against them. Either their energy crashes in the afternoon or their cycles become unpredictable. They're waking up at 3 a.m. every night, or they feel like their stress tolerance has completely disappeared. Over the years, I've noticed three primary hormonal patterns that show up again and again in high achieving women. Once you understand these patterns, you're able to stop guessing and start supporting your body in a very strategic and targeted way and give your body exactly what it is asking for and be able to continue on the things you're doing. In my work with my patients, the goal is to build resilience, but we can't do that until we understand what the underlying factors are so that we can really address it rather than just throwing all the things at you, throwing spaghetti at the wall, as it were, and just, wasting so much time and energy. So let's get right into it. The first pattern that I see most commonly in women who are busy, active, high achieving, have a lot on their plate is the wired but exhausted high stress pattern. Stress is such an ambiguous word nowadays that's thrown around. I'm stressed. Oh, it's just stress. But in reality, it's our nervous system being in overdrive, basically. And so many of us are dealing with this every single day over and over and over again. And we're kind of just putting some band-aids on it to get through the day usually, but just pushing through, especially if you are a high achieving woman who, again, maybe is in business or is a busy parent. You're tending to push through things likely because that's how you've gotten things done. In school, you were able to push through and get that project done, get things done on time, do well on tests, and that has been rewarded again and again and again. And so those are the things you continue to do until your body just won't put up with it anymore. So again, really, really common. Some of the common symptoms that we see with this are waking up around 2 to 4 a.m., feeling wired at night, but exhausted during the day, or, exhausted at night, but still just not able to go to sleep, not able to turn your brain off. Maybe you're having afternoon energy crashes, anxiety, or feeling really on edge, irritable, feeling just overwhelmed. Like if you are catching yourself feeling like, I just can't take on one more thing. Maybe you're relying on caffeine to function, maybe relying on wine to calm down in the evening, and maybe difficulty losing fat, especially in the belly section. And especially when you're doing things right, you're eating well, you're exercising, and it just still isn't budging. Now, of course, other things can cause some of those too. But when we're seeing several of these fit together, oftentimes, at least in part, stress is an issue with this. Now, why does this happen? With high performers, again, we're running on all cylinders all the time. That's how we get things done. And we can tend over the years to be really sympathetic dominant, meaning our nervous system gets kind of stuck in that fight or flight. That's how we're thriving. And we get used to that. And it sometimes can even feel uncomfortable to be in a relaxed parasympathetic state. If you're the person who's like, I can't sit still to watch a TV show or read a book, it feels really uncomfortable because you feel like you have a million other things to do. Or you sit down to meditate and you're like, I just can't do this. This isn't for me because you just can't turn your brain off. It's probably a sign actually that you need it more than anyone, that your body is just so stuck in that position and it doesn't know how to be in any other position. It's kind of like, thriving on stress in a sense. So, needing to shift it into that more relaxed state a little bit more. We can also be more prone to blood sugar instability. Our blood sugar just being a roller coaster throughout the day, which can really add to those energy dips, not being able to recover from things, all of that. And this also has a really big impact on our other hormones, including our, not only our cortisol, our stress hormones. DHEAS is also a stress hormone, but it also then has this trickle-down effect on things like our thyroid, our sex hormones, estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, as well as our blood sugar as well. That can be a side effect from the high cortisol. And over time, this can really start to have impacts in other areas. We can start to have this cascade of other hormonal issues because of this. So again, even if you're noticing a different hormonal pattern, which we'll be getting into, it could also be tied with this because our stress and our nervous system are really messaging everything in our body. And so when we have something off here, we can have, again, that trickle down effect, that cascade of things happening from there. Now, what labs are we often seeing with this? So it depends a little bit on what testing is being done. Sometimes your labs could look absolutely normal if you're going to your regular doctor and just getting basic labs. One thing that you could see is a change in your cortisol level. So serum cortisol level, the one that you get on a blood test, is very broad still, but sometimes we can start to see that, be thrown off. Usually it's farther down the line where it's been happening for long enough that your cortisol is just really out of whack. But even before that, doing a saliva cortisol test, we oftentimes can see what I'd call like a flipped curve, meaning that, our cortisol pattern throughout the day usually should be, it's high in the morning. It helps, it's what wakes us up. And then it gradually goes down throughout the day, sort of a, subtle curve. But if we're seeing it being on the low side in the morning, higher at night, that's absolutely a sign that we've been living in a very stressed state for a while and it's starting to, become dysfunctional, basically. Or we could just have a flattened cortisol curve that we're just flatlined. Our body's like, nope, I'm done. Peace out. I'm done. And it's going to force you to take a break. So that's even a farther, sign that we'll see that's really concerning when we're just bottomed out. It used to be called adrenal fatigue. Not really, it's sort of an out-of-date term now because we know it's not just our adrenals being fatigued. But either way, it's that later sign of just, our body is kind of shut down. We can also see low progesterone. So that's what I was alluding to. One of the things where we can see the farther down hormonal symptoms or signs, stress being an issue. And low progesterone tends to be one of the first ones that we'll see, as well as maybe thyroid being off. Now here, a little nuance here is that our thyroid, our TSH, which again is the typical test that's used to screen your thyroid with a typical doctor, might look fine. But if you're also doing a free T4, free T3, that's where we might see the earliest signs, particularly T3 being low, because our body is not getting all the resources in line to make enough thyroid hormone, which is T4, convert it to the active thyroid hormone T3. And so that's usually where we'll see the first sign when our HPA axis is starting to struggle a little bit. And then again, blood sugar dysregulation. We might have a higher fasting blood sugar, a higher insulin level. Maybe our hemoglobin A1C, which is like an average blood sugar over a few months, maybe that's riding a little higher than it used to be. That could be an early sign of stress impacting your health. And then some things that you can do to start to support this, if this is like, yep, this is probably me. One thing that you can do to change this is, one, stabilize your blood sugar earlier in the day. So getting that protein, getting that fiber, early in the morning, maybe within an hour of waking up, can give your body the fuel that it needs when it's getting that cortisol going to be like, okay, we're in a position that we're nourished, rather than going into the day malnourished. They'll just put more stress on you, more of that insulin roller coaster. So that could be a big piece of things. Reducing high intensity exercise and other types of hormetic stresses. Hormetic stress basically means good stress. So like exercise, some of the biohacking things like cold exposure. If you're already in a stress state all the time and your body is already really in kind of like survival mode, doing more of those things might backfire for you. So if you're, doing HIIT workouts every day, for example, and you're also stressed out every single day, all day at work, that will probably backfire. So instead, taking it down a notch, even though it feels counterintuitive, especially if you're dealing with stubborn weight, you'll think, oh, if I'm backing off on that, I'm going to gain even more weight. Probably not, actually. It'll probably work with you to scale things back a little bit. And the gold standard there should just be, it feels good. It feels good in your body while you're doing it. Feels, like you have the right energy for it and you're not feeling burnt out or exhausted from it, either right after the exercise or the days after the exercise. Getting sleep is huge here. Getting the right sleep support. If that's an issue with waking up, really addressing that. It's a chicken and egg situation, of course, at a certain point, but addressing that for, nighttime, your bedtime routine, your sleep hygiene, as well as the morning time, getting sunlight, things like that, really telling your body very clearly when it's time to be awake and alert, when it's time to be calm and asleep. That is huge. And nervous system regulation. Hands down, probably going to be the most important factor here to work on, and really, really sinking your teeth into that and really prioritizing it in your daily life. Because again, if you have stress all day, every day, doing just a little bit here and there, it's beneficial, but it probably won't do the trick to really heal everything. So really getting into, supporting your nervous system, helping it get into the parasympathetic, practicing that through breath work, journaling, meditation, whatever is the right fit for you, that really resonates with you, that really speaks to you, helps you feel really grounded and calm, and that you can be consistent with, because consistency is going to be the biggest thing here to get things to shift. And a lot of the time, a lot of the things together is really where the magic happens, because as I've talked about, a lot of these impact each other. So as you're, supporting your blood sugar, for example, that will also help your cortisol levels. And then doing the nervous system will also help with that, and also help you just make better choices in your life, because you're not feeling as overwhelmed and just grabbing the first thing that's in front of you. So this has a really big impact on every piece of your life then. The second hormone pattern that I'm often seeing, as I alluded to in the last one, is progesterone deficiency. So this can, again, go along with the stress, the imbalance of stressful and energy dependent things and the energy that we're putting into our body. That's a simple way of kind of breaking it down, is if we're having an imbalance there, we're really stressing our body, we're putting a lot of pressure on our system without nourishing it, then we can have a big imbalance. And this can really impact our progesterone levels. This is also something that we'll see in early perimenopause. So even if you're not technically perimenopausal yet, progesterone starts to drop typically first before anything else does, before your estrogen starts to skyrocket, before your estrogen and progesterone both drop. Usually the first thing we'll see is progesterone being low. And what would that look like? So usually we'll see symptoms cluster around the luteal phase. So that's the time between ovulation and our period in the second half of our cycle. It's usually about 2 weeks, but could get shorter, especially if we're having progesterone deficiency. We could start seeing that time period. If you're tracking, you might start to see that go down and down and down. That could be a sign. We could also be experiencing worse PMS. Again, super common in that early perimenopause, pre-perimenopause stage that I see a lot of women in. Heightened PMS, where you're not just cranky, you're just biting everyone's head off. You can't feel normal. Maybe you're having a lot of anxiety or depression or both, or your energy is just plummeting during that time. You could have breast tenderness, bloating, heavy periods, spotting before your periods, again, shorter cycles in general, maybe not just the luteal phase, but your whole cycle will also look shorter. So even if you're not tracking, if you just are looking at when your period is, then you'll see, oh, it used to be 28 days, 29 days, and now it's like 25 days. That could be an early sign as well. Now, why is this happening? So some common drivers, like I mentioned, big one is chronic stress suppressing ovulation or suppressing progesterone production. Progesterone production happens after ovulation from the corpus luteum being developed, basically the envelope, if you will, that the egg comes out of that is ovulated, that turns into the corpus luteum. It's basically this tiny organ that is produced in your ovaries every cycle, and it takes a lot of energy. And so if we don't give it the right resources, this could have an issue and be just not quite on point to have enough progesterone. We can also have an imbalance of estrogen and progesterone. So part of it can also be that our estrogen is high and that there's a big imbalance there, which I'll mention a little bit further. Insulin resistance, again, can come up here. So our blood sugar being unstable, having more and more insulin in our system because our cells aren't as responsive to it. And having, toxic exposures, chemical exposures, especially if it's been for a long period of time, this can start to impact things as well. Again, a lot of stress being put on the system that it's not able to cope with, and it can start taking a toll. Labs that we see here, again, low progesterone. So usually, it would have to be in the luteal phase. So basically we are not producing progesterone before ovulation. So it'd be after ovulation. Usually I would do this about 7 to 10 days after ovulation when we check a progesterone level. And this can be a really good measure. Of course, we can sometimes, the timing matters, basically. We want to catch the peak. And usually in that time frame, we will do that. But, it can be variable. So that can be one early sign. having an imbalance in our symptoms is really going to be a huge early clue, though, for most people. We're not typically starting with a progesterone level with our, regular doctor. And so usually we're seeing those symptoms before we're seeing lab signs of that. You could also see some other markers of stress and strain on your body that could be, not a direct indicator of low progesterone, but maybe a root cause of low progesterone. For example, inflammation markers being elevated, like CRP or high sensitivity CRP and ESR. Maybe we have other, signs of maybe our liver and detox being a little bit off. So maybe our liver enzymes being a little bit higher. Again, some signs that our body is taxed, that's undergoing more stress and strain. We could also see micronutrient deficiencies. Again, normally we're not getting these checked, unfortunately, with a primary doctor, but maybe they're checking your vitamin D and that's low. Maybe they're checking your iron levels and those are low. Those could be signs. Again, those are required for healthy cellular health, for cells to be able to function optimally. And if our cells aren't functioning optimally, then that can also impact our hormone production across the board. And then what can we do about this? Again, some foundational support that we can give here if this seems like an area of issue potentially for you. I mentioned that balance of energy in, energy out, really looking there. How are you feeling your body in the morning? How are you taxing your body throughout the day? What does that look like, especially around, the middle part of your cycle and last part of your cycle? Are you feeling exhausted and you're pushing through anyway? Are you not fueling even though you're starving? Are you listening to your cues? Usually our body is telling us when we have higher nutrient needs, higher energy needs. It oftentimes can come with feeling more tired, unfortunately, but also maybe having more cravings. So leaning into that can be huge and really helping you, support your body. Also just supporting your cellular health. Like I mentioned, our cells need to be healthy and optimal to have healthy hormone production. So, getting some good micronutrients in, getting magnesium, B vitamins, zinc, those are really common nutrient deficiencies that I see, especially in women around their 30s, because we've been underfueling for quite some time typically. We're not getting quite what we need from our food system. So that can be really huge. There could also be support with progesterone in the form of herbs, as well as actual progesterone supplementation, which can be fantastic and really useful. But I encourage people to start from the basics first, because if you're just not sleeping well at night or something like that, that's going to be the core thing that you need to address, because that's going to impact your entire health. So rather than slapping a Band-Aid on it, as much as I love progesterone supplementation, looking at the foundations as well first and really making sure you're supporting your body in a really healthy, balanced way before just supplementing with things. The third hormone pattern that I'm commonly seeing in high-achieving women is the metabolic dysfunction pattern. So this comes with insulin resistance, metabolic stress, and this can look a little bit different than the other ones. While these can all be tied together also, we can see them all together, but this can look a little bit different where maybe we're not seeing the direct hormone issues, but our metabolism is really showing up with an issue. This could be the person who, again, is eating well, working out, but their body composition is changing and maybe they're gaining weight or not able to lose any weight despite their efforts. Some symptoms that we might see here commonly: increasing abdominal fat, especially difficulty losing fat despite their exercise, energy crashes in the afternoon or just post-meal or between meals, maybe some strong cravings for carbs, sugars, crunchy types of snacks. Maybe they're having brain fog either across the board or after meals. They could also have some medical concerns cropping up, like high cholesterol, high triglycerides, and just feeling hungrier, feeling maybe more addicted to food in a sense. So not necessarily exactly addicted to food, but feeling very much more dependent, I guess is a good word for it. Feeling like you can't go very long between snacking or between meals, and you're feeling this big sort of like roller coaster yo-yo happening throughout the day. And you could actually still be lean or normal weight. Some people don't necessarily, they're not as prone to weight gain, but things could be shifting still with their metabolism, and there could still be an issue. So why does this happen? High achieving women are often unknowingly creating a metabolic stress from, the chronic cortisol elevation, the sleep disruption, the inconsistent fueling because they're so busy. Maybe they're under eating, maybe high stress workloads, maybe more intense training because when you do something, you do it really well, right? And that can come with just being more prone to intense exercise also. And over time, this can impair insulin signaling and just make it harder for cells to be really efficient with glucose uptake, that sugar uptake, and not being as sensitive and also just not as resilient to blood sugar changes. We can get more kind of like fragile with how we're responding to our blood sugar. And then insulin resistance then oftentimes promotes fat storage, especially visceral fat. So that's our belly fat, but not the jiggly stuff right under the skin. That's the whole belly looking bigger because the fat is within our belly around our organs. And this is actually the most dangerous type of fat to have on our body. The jiggly stuff on the outside, while we might not like it, is not necessarily directly impacting our health quite nearly as much as our visceral fat. So there's a huge marker there. We can have increased inflammation as well as a result of the insulin resistance. This can also be one of those cycles where we're more inflamed, we're more, insulin resistant and so on. We can also have impaired ovarian hormone signaling, meaning again, those sex hormones, estrogen and progesterone, those can be thrown off also by our insulin being out of whack. So what labs are we often seeing here? Some typical patterns we might see is an elevated fasting insulin. So this is an easy test to get that, again, most doctors aren't necessarily getting, but it's a very easy one to do. And ideally, we're seeing this under 8, maybe 10, depending on the person, but really shouldn't be higher than that. If it is higher than that, then that could be definitely a warning sign. An elevated HOMA-IR. So basically what this is kind of just like a ratio calculation to determine our insulin resistance. Again, not a common one that's being tested by every single doctor, but it's very data-driven and has a lot of data behind it to show how impactful it is and how predictive it is of our health. Having high triglycerides, high total cholesterol, LDL, and low HDL. So sort of a flipped pattern of what we want our cholesterol markers to look like. And then in fasting, glucose that's elevated, our blood sugar being elevated even when we haven't eaten for some time. And this can also go along with a hemoglobin A1C being elevated. Again, that's an average blood sugar over a few months. So we can see either one of those or both of them being elevated. And I really like to see those along with the fasting insulin to really get a good picture, because one without the others doesn't paint the full picture because our blood sugar is going up and down so much throughout the day. So just a hemoglobin A1C for screening isn't really quite giving us all the information that we want. And again, we can see elevated inflammation markers here as well. So that, again, HSCRP, ESR, because insulin resistance can, create so much inflammation in our system, that could be a sign as well. And even if labs are technically normal, there may be trends that are moving in that direction. So checking these early and really looking at them through a more kind of critical lens can be helpful to catch things early on. And pairing that with your symptoms. I never look at labs without talking to the person and really understanding their symptoms, because that can be really powerful to point us in the right direction as well. Because again, if you're like, I am on a roller coaster, I know that I am, my blood sugar is crashing between meals, I feel crazy, whatever, then that is giving us so much valuable information, and that's really worth listening to. And now, why does this matter for our hormones? Again, our insulin, we're usually thinking like our blood sugar, how is that connected to our hormones? Well, again, insulin is a hormone. It's the hormone that controls blood sugar, but it also impacts other things. So for one, it can increase androgen production in the ovaries. Androgens are like testosterone, sort of like the quote unquote male hormones. And those can start having symptoms of things like growing hair in places that we don't want it to be, like on our chin. Feeling more irritable could be another symptom of that. It can impair ovulation. So this is a really common thing that we often see in PCOS. In PCOS, the characteristic thing oftentimes is having anovulation or inconsistent ovulation, which then makes periods irregular or really long. Or I should say cycles very irregular and cycles being very long. So that could be another thing that we're seeing. We can also have worse estrogen and progesterone balance. So like I mentioned, progesterone being low, insulin resistance can tax the system and make progesterone go low. It can also make estrogen go higher. And especially if we're in this cycle of inflammation, insulin resistance, high estrogen, it's just all feeding each other. And again, this can all contribute to cycle irregularities, whether or not it's, full-blown PCOS, we could have irregularities. And also if someone is in perimenopause, it could be that we're having this layered effect of things just worsening each other. And that's where sometimes we'll see women's experience with perimenopause improve when we're addressing things like their metabolic health. It could be that it's driving things and actually, speeding things up in a sense in terms of making your cycles more irregular. And sometimes we get cycles to normalize with addressing some of these core things. And now some foundational support for metabolic health. Again, getting some good protein and fiber first thing in the morning, giving that fuel that's going to be stabilizing your blood sugar. Strength training. So, there's a lot of talk lately about building muscle and maintaining muscle for our longevity. This is a big piece of it. It really helps us control our insulin levels, helps us control our glucose levels. So strength training can be a great thing to have as part of your routine. And maybe more so, especially in this phase or in this person who it may be more stressed out, doing more of the slow strength training rather than the fast HIIT workouts, running, things like that could give your body the right signals to find better balance with its metabolism. Stable meal timing. So trying to keep consistent meals, even if you're working, taking a moment to grab a bite to eat, really sitting down and making it a legitimate meal, having maybe a more balanced meal than two usually, rather than just snacking, grazing. It oftentimes is imbalanced with what we're eating, could have a lot more sugar that then impacts this roller coaster even more. Sleep, again, sleep is probably the most important thing we could ever do for our health. And this can be a big issue too. It can be a lot harder when we have insulin resistance. Our sleep can actually be worse then. So again, doing those things, working on our sleep hygiene, in addition to working on things during the day, can be really powerful. Walking after meals or doing squats after meals, this can have a huge impact on our blood sugar, as well as being well hydrated. So considering maybe taking a quick walk after meals could be a really big game changer if you are in, this metabolic dysfunction place. So to recap, the three most common patterns that I see in high achieving women are that high cortisol, stressed out, wired but exhausted, the hormone roller coaster with low progesterone and really being in an energy deficit, and the metabolic slowdown with our insulin being resistant and a high amount of metabolic stress. And again, these can coexist together. But oftentimes, I will say that oftentimes there's one that tends to be more dominant. And when in doubt, starting with the basics, those foundations, again, a lot of those are redundant because they're so important for all different aspects of our body. So when in doubt, you can draw on some of those foundational things like supporting your sleep. If you're unsure about your hormones and you're really wondering, I don't even know, I don't even know what state I'm in, I just feel like things are a mess, hop onto my website and take the hormone quiz. I'll link that in the show notes. That will help in under 2 minutes, help you really get clear on what's your predominant pattern. And that will put you in one of 4 categories of the primary hormone patterns. So you'll get a lot more conclusive information. And it'll also follow up with some videos from me, some nice, strategic tips based on what your results showed. So that can be a really great starting point to start to understand things. And then, to go further too, I talked about these foundational things. I know that sometimes it can feel like, well, I'm doing those things and it's not working. And so what next? What else can I do? That's when it's really helpful to work with a practitioner, really get some strategic, personalized support so that you can really understand, okay, here are the pieces for me. Here's how I'm going to address it. Here's exactly how I can fit into my busy lifestyle and be successful. And that will save a lot of time and energy rather than just guessing and trying to figure it out for yourself. In my practice, I use my signature method, the RISE method, where we're really digging into things, really understanding what your unique factors are, and then working together to address those in a very strategic way. So if you want to learn more about that, you can also schedule a clarity call with me. Be happy to walk you through kind of what that looks like to work with us. And we can also talk a little bit more about what hormone patterns you're kind of fitting into, what's going on in your life, what's brought you to where you are now, which, like the name of the call said, we can give you a lot of clarity. I think it's really important that we feel really clear in understanding what's going on with our health, because especially for high achieving women, you are smart and you are driven and you're doing things right. And so the bottleneck, the thing that's slowing you down, isn't that you don't have enough information. There's more than enough information at your fingertips. It's really understanding what's going on in your body, connecting back to that intuition, what your body's telling you, understanding the signs that your body is giving, and then being very strategic and fast tracking your results with strategy and experience so that you're not wasting any more time guessing and that you're really just getting the results that you need finally so you can keep up with your lifestyle. You can keep having this massive, incredible impact on your world, on your community. And that's really my goal, to support women who are doing incredible things in the world. So I hope you found this helpful. If you had any questions about any of these, feel free to reach out. You can email us at info@drmirandanaylor.com. You can comment wherever you're listening or watching this as well. And I'd be happy to answer any questions. All right, take care.